Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical political, economic, and social issues facing our world today. Joining Mr. Davis today for a discussion on the limitations of free speech is Len Carter. Len is an investment banker, business consultant, and private investor. And now, Mr. Davis and Mr. Carter.
Welcome back. It's Wednesday evening, 6:30, and it's time for the Morty Davis. What's the thing?
Voice of Wisdom.
Voice of Wisdom. That shows you how much wisdom I have. I can't even remember what the name of the program is. Anyway, the Voice of Wisdom. And also, I'm pleased once again, to have a real voice of wisdom, Len Carter. As I have told you, revealed to you in the past, Len Carter was a top of his class, of the same alumnus, same school that I went to, Harvard Business School, and he's brilliant. Before that, he was the top of his class at Cornell, one of the great Ivy School universities, and then he went on to, in engineering that was, and then he went on to Stanford, where he was top of his class in engineering. So I'm always pleased to have his wisdom presented to you or offered to you. So with that introduction, welcome back, Len.
Thank you.
Before we get into the current events and the issues of the day and the discussion or debates that we may have, I want to give you, as I always do, I want to launch some way for you to be happier. Ideally, I'd love everybody in the world to be happy and peaceful and loving, but I can only do my share. I hope ultimately I'm writing another book on how to make the world a better place, but it's very hard to change the world. But I'd like to start with my audience here and as many people as I can reach through my book, which is an excellent book. It's right here. Happiness Guaranteed or Your Misery Back. How to Be Happy No Matter What. That's the subtitle. And if you get this book, I promise you, you're going to be happier than you are. I can't say you're going to be, like you would be if you took cocaine, but quality happiness, real genuine happiness, more loving, more smiling, more of the things that really we admire in people and in ourselves if we can achieve that. So before anything, I would urge you to get a copy of this book. And I told you, and I'm sure it's a unique offer, and I can only make it because so far everybody who's ever talked to me about this book and who purchased it or received it as gifts have called, and so far nobody's beaten me up yet, but have called and said how blessed they feel that they got a hold of this book, how much happier they are, how much it's helped them in so many other ways, even to achieve success. So, and also to be more loving. They understand that one of the messages I give is nobody ever died wishing they spent more time at the office. So I encourage them to love their soulmate, their wife or husband or significant other, and to tell them and their kids to kiss them, hug them, and in general to smile at people, to try to uh, spread happiness throughout all your contacts and the part of the world that you occupy. So for this session, I'm telling you that if you get the book and you're not happy with it, I will not only refund your purchase price, I will refund double your purchase price. If you send me the purchase, what do you call it, invoice, I will send you back double the amount. So if that doesn't, most of the things on TV, most of the advertisements say if you're not happy with it, you could even keep the bottle or keep the rest of it, and we'll and call our service part of the company, and we will arrange to send you back your purchase price. But I'm the only one that says, because so far nobody would, from the people I hear from, nobody would have done that. So, and you can keep the book too. So it's a win-win. Um, so today, let me tell you because I urge you in different ways to be happy. Today, I want to be tougher than that. I want to insist that you be happy. I want to be like your father, or maybe your grandfather, or your boss, and tell you, you better do this, what I'm telling you now. Make up your mind you're going to be happy. Don't allow negative thoughts to occupy your mind. We only have a limited time on this earth. Use that time to think positively. Bishop Sheen wrote one of the best books I ever read. It said the title of the book was, I had it on the tip of my tongue. um, I'll think of it in a while. But anyway, was it the power of positive thinking? Maybe that's it. The power of positive thinking. Think positively. Think about good things. Think about things that are happy. Think about your blessings. Yeah, we all have negative things in our lives. Nobody has a perfect life. Maybe one guy, but I haven't met him yet. Uh, so make up your mind you're going to be happy. I insist that you do that. And then you'll see it. It's all attitudinal. Once you do that, you'll definitely be happier. So if I find out you're not doing that, I'm going to come after you, like a father comes after a child, or the boss comes after you. I'm going to cut your pay. Anyway, be happy, please. It helps your every part of your body physically, mentally, your plumbing of your body, everything. So anytime you start to have negative thoughts, shift gears right away and do something that gets rid of that depressing thought. I told you over and over again, for me it's easy. I just run down to the freezer and break out some chocolate Haagen-Dazs and whipped cream and chopped nuts and a cherry, and all of a sudden I'm happy as a pig in whatever.
In Haagen-Dazs.
In Haagen-Dazs. Okay, let's get on with the issues of the day. Len,
there are many.
Okay,
there
let's start with Len.
In the week since the last issues of the day.
Right.
So
do they ever get better? Each week it seems a little worse. See, after I urge you to be happy, we bring you all the news that will make you unhappy. I apologize.
This is a test.
Yeah.
The United States prides itself on being either the only country or maybe one of the few, but maybe the only country that has, a First Amendment which guarantees certain rights, including free speech and freedom of assembly. But we know that no no privilege can be unfettered, can be uncontrolled. We know that free speech is limited. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater.
Why? Do other countries charge for speech? It's not free in the other countries.
It's just not protected. Yeah, it's
okay.
I don't think the UK has a First Amendment in that regard, in that protection. That specifically says Congress shall make no law to restrict.
I don't think free speech is necessarily the way we use free. Free means you don't have to pay for it.
Yes.
It's
unencumbered,
totally tolerated.
Yes.
You know, all speech has to be tolerated.
Right. Yes. Unfettered.
Unfettered,
speech, yes.
Unconstrained.
But we know that even that is not just like we know, that there are states that have gun laws, even though there's a Second Amendment that says what it says.
Or you can't holler fire in a
theater,
crowded theater.
Right. So, and yet that's free speech.
Yeah.
Why can't I do that? So there are certain speech, and then becomes interpretation of what that means. Interestingly, that's in the news these days with regard to hate speech. The Supreme Court said hate speech is free speech. But again, that's in the context of the government making no law to restrict hate speech. That doesn't mean that a private institution like a university can have rules on what they deem is appropriate speech. So, this argument that we see at the forefront these days of free speech on campuses, is based on an argument using the First Amendment. But I would say that a university has the right, as a private institution, to determine what type of speech is appropriate or not. And while the First Amendment may guarantee hate speech in the form of a public gathering, I don't think universities have to guarantee and protect hate speech within their university. They have the right to say that's not appropriate, which I think was the big mistake that those three presidents made when they were before the congressional hearing, when they were asked, is a call to genocide free speech or hate speech or appropriate speech? And their answers were, it depends on the context. But
the presidents of universities,
right?
I thought you meant presidents of the United States.
No, the three university presidents that were before.
Harvard, Cornell,
it was Penn, Harvard, and MIT.
Right.
And the answer should have been, I believe, while the Supreme Court protects hate speech and a call to genocide might very well be hate speech, that is not permitted at my university, right, because I have a different standard. I'm not governed by the First Amendment. I'm governed by the principles that I feel should be that govern this university. So,
she doesn't say, or they didn't say, I shouldn't be governed by the First Amendment. They say it depends on
the context. But I think that's
an escape.
Yeah, but I think,
but they do believe in the First Amendment. They protect the First Amendment.
Right, but hate speech, while protected under the First Amendment in, like I say, a public setting, doesn't have to be protected in a university setting. Yeah. They don't have to permit that sort of speech if they don't want to. And they have the right to determine what is appropriate and not appropriate in their university.
Does it violate the First Amendment if they make rules that limit free speech?
Within their university,
yeah,
it would not.
No?
Because the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. It doesn't say private institutions or private citizens, can't determine. That's why private clubs are technically allowed to discriminate against whoever they want.
Yeah.
Employers can't, because there are rules that say employers are not allowed to discriminate. There are employment laws, but there aren't such. I guess Congress could pass legislation that would say universities are not allowed to limit speech of any kind, but then that would be a mess, because then it would get into the issue of, okay, so is calling for genocide like calling for fire in a crowded theater? So we all know fire in a crowded theater is not allowed. So what about genocide? So, but it's very simple, because that isn't the case. Universities are allowed to do whatever they want, and should. I think so. The issue that is the broad issue is, where does that line get drawn in terms of what is appropriate and not appropriate free speech? And I think the first thing that I want to talk about, we saw this just the other day, and it's interesting because it is, in this case, it's a government act where Israel moved to shut down Al Jazeera in Israel. The Israeli government shut them down, took the equipment away, and they said the reason we did that is because Al Jazeera was, inciting hate or inciting violence, and
or doing propaganda that was devastating to the country.
Correct. So now, I don't believe there's I don't know if there's similar First Amendment type of rights in there, but I mean, that's a very interesting case, and I think people came out on different sides. There's the media that has come out and said that's not right. Even if even if the government doesn't agree. I mean, imagine in the U.S. if the Biden administration turned off Fox News, or if Trump turned off CNN, which he wanted to do.
In Judaism, there's something that's prohibited, vastly prohibited. It's like it says you deserve death if you talk Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is bad talk. Lashon is bad conversation, because you could ruin a person's life with that. So there's very strong prohibitions against talking in ways that are harmful to others. But I don't even want to go there. The United States, I doubt that you're old enough, but some years back, the Ku Klux Klan was having some conference or some protest or some whatever outdoor meeting, and they called all Ku Klux members throughout the United States to come, and the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, the NAACP, objected strongly to that, allowing that to occur, because the Ku Klux Klan, all they do is malign African Americans and Jews and other minorities, perhaps.
Originally Catholics.
Capitalists.
Catholics.
Maybe. Oh, Catholics, yeah.
I mean, originally the KKK was anti-Catholic.
Yeah. Right. So the Supreme Court, it was brought to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said their free speech entitled them to have that meeting, which was really taken it a long way. So based on that, it's hard to see how anybody could stop a university from putting restrictions on speech, because if they didn't allow a restriction on the Ku Klux Klan.
Well, but I don't know. I don't know if that was the march in the 70s. The Nazis. There was a big issue in Skokie, Illinois, where the Nazis wanted to march in public, and it was tried. People tried to block it, and I'm not sure if that went to the Supreme Court or not, but in the end, they were permitted.
Really? So the Ku Klux Klan and the Nazis are not limited. No matter what they say,
right,
those meetings.
It was, and again, the Supreme Court says hate speech is free speech.
Right.
However, I would say there's a difference between marching down Main Street and having the government say you can't march down Main Street, provided it's peaceful. You're not throwing rocks at people, and you're not menacing people.
Yeah.
And that, I would say, although it's repulsive, I would have to say permitted. In a university setting, for students to, protest, I would say, not to quote the professor, the presidents, but in that case, it depends on the context. If, for example, the protesters...
You sound like the presidents of the universities who said, do you object to genocide?
But they were asked a specific question. I'm not being asked a specific question. That's why I have to preface it in context, because I can give you two examples. The first example would be if the protesters were marching around the middle quad there, calling for, end to the war. We don't want war. We want peace. Peace is better than war. Make love, not war. That kind of stuff.
They're allowed to do that.
I would say they're allowed to do that, provided they're peaceful, provided they're not throwing rocks at people or menacing. So that's speech. The same protest, no rocks, no throwing, nothing, but the same protest, now they're saying death to Israel, or river from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That rises to a level of hate speech. And because it's my university, I say you are not allowed to deliver hate speech on my university. And I will be the judge of that. Calling for an end to war is different than calling for, the river to the sea. And so in that regard, even if they're both completely peaceful.
You're not allowed to use speech that
incites a riot.
That inspires harm to other people.
Right. So, and so I guess back to the first one too. If the first protest, even if it's non-hate speech, stop the war, end the war, we want peace, no hate speech. But if that demonstration incites a riot, then it has to be stopped. Because again, free speech that incites riot is not permissible, even if it's free speech. So in that regard, I think what's going on the campuses, in my mind, is a lot clearer than a lot of people see, because it's like you have the right to express what you want to express, even if it doesn't agree with my policy or my thoughts. You just don't have the right to hate speech, because I don't permit hate speech on my university. I don't care what it is. Even if it's your view, I don't care. And so long as, again, you're not breaking into buildings, breaking windows, menacing people, or harming people. Now, a lot of times it goes to that, it very quickly gets there because there's agitators, because, in a mob mentality that happens easily when people get riled up, and there are outside, right? I mean, Colombia, the NYPD said like about half of the people arrested that were taken out of Hamilton Hall that night, half of them were not Columbia students.
Oh, yeah.
They were just
A lot of
outside
outsiders,
people
yeah.
who just came in
Agitators,
and riled up the crowd and caused that.
Or were paid maybe by Qatar or
we don't know where they came
one
from.
of the Arab
Right.
countries.
But they certainly weren't.
Right.
They weren't
But to get
affiliated
back
with
to the
students.
question that you
So your
put to
question
me
is back to Israel.
about Al Jazeera.
Right. Should Netanyahu have shut
Israel
down?
Right to do that? And I have to tell you, of all the countries in the world, Israel's got to be the most open country in terms of, because they let news people, journalists, photographers, in the midst of anything where they could be embarrassed, even where they might be attacking people that are protesting violently. They're just wide open. And Al Jazeera, which is clearly an anti-Israel Arab nation, a country, it's a media outlet. It's funded by Qatar. Qatar was even supposedly one of the sponsors of what happened on October 7th in Israel, the savage attacks, the horrendous treatment of women, of kids, of the rapes. So, it's funny that Qatar acts as a peacemaking, trying to get the peace between Israel and Hamas settled, while their actions are totally contrary to Israel's interests. So, was it right for them to close down Al Jazeera? Absolutely, because they're provoking anti-Israel, because they were never closed down. They say terrible things about Israel. But here they were actually provoking harmful acts against the country, against the government, against the military, even disclosing secrets that they got a hold of somehow. So you can't tolerate that. I mean, the United
criticism,
States, without having any evidence, wants to close down TikTok or make the owner of the company that's Chinese sell it to an American because they may be using it or they could
national
be using
security.
It. Right.
Look, I mean, I admit I don't know a lot of the detailed circumstances in this. If it's one thing if Fox News criticizes the Biden administration, which they do on a daily or hourly basis.
Really? That surprises me.
And it's another thing if they called for a revolt or an insurrection, because then I would agree that that's where I think the government would have the right to intervene and shut them down. But if they're just if they're just criticizing the government, then I would say we don't have the right to do that. So in the case of Al Jazeera, and I admit I don't know the details, if it was just a criticism of Netanyahu, then I'd say it's hard to make the case. If it was an actual call to arms, like, kind of what the debate on January 6th is, was that a call to arms, or was it just a criticism of Mike Pence and the way that so that's clearly that's what it goes to.
Clearly, they made a determination that it went beyond beyond what's reasonable, because as I told you, Israel permits intrusions. They're the only ones that during the wars, during they have not the only ones, but
But
they allow the media.
But I'll tell you what I've said many times, and this is another perfect example of that.
Yeah.
The fact that I don't know the reason that it was shut down, and it probably was a good one, like you're saying, again, goes to how bad Israel is at PR.
Oh, yeah.
Because the first thing that they should have done after they shut down
Yeah.
Al Jazeera is come out with a whole thing.
I agree with
why
you.
we're shutting them down. Look at what they did. Look at this. Look at that. So that, look, when you can control your own narrative, control your narrative. Don't let other people control your narrative. That's what they're so bad at.
More, unless there was something classified that they did, but
well, whatever it was, I mean, it's public, you know. So they didn't.
They should say why they're shutting it down.
Because if we don't know that,
I think they did say some explanation.
Well, but let's put it this way: if they did, it wasn't
disseminated.
Right, it wasn't loud enough because the few stories that I read on that, all it said was like, because Israel said this. Right. Show evidence, right? I mean, it's like when the strongest cases that people make on October 7th is when they see real blood on the ground, and they see it's like that's that really brings it to heart.
But the news media, in my view, every single day accepts without any evidence statements made by Hamas that the Israelis are killing kids, that they're raping women, without any evidence, with nobody seen it, nobody's heard of it, So they have no parameters. They're allowed to say whatever they want because there's nobody to control them. The UN is totally supportive of them. I don't know, to this day, I still can't figure out what the UN does that's positive, or why it's funded by the United States, why it exists. I haven't seen one action that they've taken over the years that justifies their existence. We said the League of Nations, which was set up after the First World War, was a failure. I guess it didn't achieve anything. I don't know that the UN has done anything more. And they're very intrusive. The head of the UN is on practically every day criticizing Israel. I've never heard any of the leaders of the UN do anything, say anything that justifies what Israel does or that favors Israel. So, but separate from Israel, they're critical of the United States. They're critical. I just don't know.
Although, I mean, not that it's on a positive note.
There's a positive note on that.
When has the U.S. ever done what the UN wanted it to do versus what it wanted to do? If the U.S. wants to do something, they're going to do it. They're not going. So it's toothless.
Yeah, but why would the United States, which is the largest funder,
why would they tolerate
of the UN,
that?
Yeah, why do they host them? Why do they have a major place in the States, in New York, a major building? They have enormous funds from the U.S.
Not to mention how many parking spots they take up.
And they don't, and the U.S. doesn't control what they do with the funds. For example, UNRWA was accused, and they seem to have evidence of participating in the October 7th intrusion, more than intrusion, genocide, true genocide on October 7th, and there's no consequences. The United States stopped providing funds for UNRWA, but a lot of countries stepped up and increased their funding because the United States pulled out. So in making it this a better world, I'm going to include setting up a new institution that succeeds the UN with the goals that were initially supposedly the objective of the UN, of keeping peace in the world, of being a fair arbitrator.
I think that's a good discussion topic.
Okay.
Seriously, we'll have on what to do with and how to improve the UN. I like that. But let's just
blow it up.
Let's.
Is that free speech, or will I get arrested because
call to violence?
I'm
that's
advocating,
probably a problem.
Yeah. How about Trump says? Biden should be killed.
I thought you would never mention our favorite topic, but since you did, we can go now to talk about another free speech debate around Donald Trump. Now that you brought him up,
Donald Trump charges. If you want to,
it's not free, right?
Speak.
It's a royalty.
It's not free, right?
So here's as everyone has heard, that Donald Trump is on trial for his hush money case, and prior to the case, because of what he had been saying publicly, the judge issued a gag order on him to implore him, or I shouldn't say implore, to
gag him,
to prevent him, to prevent him from speaking negatively about certain things. So he's allowed, the gag order covers the jury.
Well, he doesn't stop him from speaking negatively. He stops him from speaking in ways that could jeopardize the judge's daughter, the members of the jury, intimidation of witnesses.
Right. So it's not
speech. It's more than speech.
Well, he's not allowed to say anything about the jury, about the judge's family. He's allowed to talk about the judge. He's allowed to talk about the judge. He's allowed to talk about. I believe, the DA, even. He's in the case, but he's not allowed to trash witnesses or the jury. I mean, look at what happened when they were doing the jury selection. One of the jurors got so nervous about, potentially being threatened that she couldn't go be a juror. I mean, I could see how that could happen, because there are a lot of people who, if Trump called for, if he called for a revolt against the jurors, they might do that.
I think it was said, I don't know, maybe I don't have the wrong person, but I think they said he gave out the address of the judge's daughter. And that's for people that think this judge is vicious because he's prosecuting or persecuting Trump. That could be dangerous to our life.
Sure.
So it's put a gag order on him. He doesn't care. Trump, he keeps on doing it. As a matter of fact, I think he indicated today that he wouldn't mind if the judge has threatened that he might put him in prison for violating, because he fined him the maximum fine for each violation of this rule is $1,000 so far. So far, Trump has paid $9,000.
10. There was one more. Yeah.
So
not exactly.
That's not going to impact his behavior, his lifestyle. But he feels that, maybe visibly put into jail would so mobilize his following that they contribute enormously, that maybe they'd pull another January 6th and violate turn over the court, kill the judge, So the
So-
judge is just behaving. He can't stop him from having his free speech because he would be overruled and so forth. So they would appeal it.
So I think it comes back to that free speech is limited if it involves menacing, and when Trump is talking about the jurors or menacing the jurors through speech, that's not free speech. That is the same thing as protesters at colleges, calling, getting in the faces of students that don't agree with them. So I think there is an appropriateness for the gag order. The question is, what do you do if you're the judge? Because one, the money doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, and he hasn't stopped him.
And you wonder if he even wants you, if he's taunting and tempting the judge. But and the judge said, "Look, I don't want to put you in jail, but he
won't put him in jail. I don't believe there's a chance in the world. Just like they said, if he's found guilty from some of these.
So then
crimes,
why do you let him get away with it? So if you're the judge, you let him get away with it? You only have two tools with Trump: the fines, which don't mean anything, and jail. So what do you do?
I think bottom line,
I'd put him in jail.
Bottom line,
for an afternoon, not overnight.
Okay,
I would put him in jail for 2 hours.
I'm saying most of the wise men, the top lawyers, top prosecutors, top law enforcement, whatever, that are the most respected, are of the opinion that Trump will never go to jail, no matter if he's found guilty of all these crimes.
Well, that may very well be, but that's not the gag order. The question for the gag order is, does the judge, in order to enforce the gag order, specifically the gag order, how do you enforce the gag order? Or don't you? Do you just let him walk on you?
Look, we have a statement that's repeated 50 times a day that we're all under the same law.
No one's above the law.
No one's above the law. And clearly, based on.
But if you're a judge, that should have meaning to you, right? That you should. So
look, the judge in Florida that's dealing with the Trump's
classified documents,
taking all the documents illegally out of the White House if they left, including classified, and then lying about that he returned them all to the what's it called, the what?
Obstruction of the
what's the institution that gets it, that gathers all the those after the president leaves. There's an institution like a museum or that is assigned.
I don't know, archives, presidential archives. I don't know.
The archives. That's it. The archives. Supposed to go to the archives, and they warned him that you got to return it to the archives, and then he lied to the FBI, lied to we returned him. He had his lawyers return him. And now she's so favorable to, so biased.
Right, but that doesn't mean that's the right thing. What the judge does. The question is, what's the right thing for the judge to do? Or in this case, with the gag order, what's the right thing?
Yeah, that's not a judge. That's an advocate. Yeah.
But isn't doing nothing and allowing Trump to tweet and do all this stuff, isn't that being an advocate?
He feels he can't do anything. He did
He
what,
could do
what the
something.
law
He could put him in
what the
jail.
law requires, $1,000
He
every
could
time
put
he
him in
does it.
jail.
Yeah, and he warned them that he would,
Yeah.
and he may. But my inclination is that he won't, because most bright people, I think the implications of doing that
Well,
are
I think
potentially.
that's why I agree. It could be just setting off a tinderbox, but that's why my approach would be more symbolic.
Hang him.
Would be, and obviously he's going to have Secret Service. He's in no danger or anything. You have 100 Secret Service agents wherever he goes. Even if he goes to Rikers, he's going to have Secret Service.
Eight Secret Servicemen, 24 hours
right.
a day.
But
Three
it's a point.
shifts.
It's a
Three
point.
shifts.
And I don't even, as much as I think, when Trump gets up there and says, I'm doing this for you, not for me. And
he's so nice. He makes all these sacrifices for all the people.
So, but I think at the end of the day, I don't know if he really does want to go to prison, even if it's for a few hours. So that's, look, I think at some point a statement has to.
He does.
He does?
Symbolic. Especially if it's only for a day or a few hours.
No.
It definitely helps his fundraising, his following.
So, well, I guess we'll see. I'm sure he's not going to. It's not over. We got a lot more tweeting to come.
Oh yeah.
So speaking of how do you deal with people that violate orders or free speech, back to how presidents of universities have been dealing with the pro-Palestinian protests on their campus. We've seen most of the schools, at least the ones in New York, bringing in the NYPD. Maybe
the police department.
Maybe in Columbia's case, after there was already violence and vandalism, but in the other cases at NYU and Fordham and CUNY and some other schools in the city, I think they learned a lesson. Columbia was sort of the leading edge. In fact, that's where all the protests started last month. I think they learned their lesson to try to get in front of this and don't let it get out of control before you bring in the NYPD. And if you can make the case as a university president that you're doing this because it violates university policy and you're doing it because it's interfering with the students' learning and everything else, then you can make a reasonable case. And you gave them fair warning.
So what lesson did Columbia
teach? Bring in the NYPD before it gets out of control. So that's why.
So it's finished at Columbia?
I mean, they
because they even locked up Jewish presidents, locked them in their rooms, in their classrooms.
Well, at Columbia, I mean, they cleared out Hamilton Hall, which is where the barricade was. I believe they've cleared the tents out of the quad. They did cancel graduation, the main graduation. They're going to have smaller graduation. So
this class has no luck.
Yeah.
They never got a high school graduation.
Yeah, the 2020 class. Yep. So, but I think they waited. They waited for the occupation of that hall before they brought in the NYPD. The other schools did not. They got ahead of it and took them out before it got out of control.
I think the head of the Columbia. The president is Muslim.
Yeah, Shafiq. She's Egyptian. There are a few schools that took a different approach, and they've gotten criticism on both sides. Rutgers, as an example, and Northwestern, as an example. So they had the same rumblings, encampments, and they all pretty much have the same demands. We're not going to leave until you divest. And none of the places that brought in the NYPD agreed to any of those demands. They said, we're not going to negotiate. You got to leave. But Northwestern said, well, let's talk. Let's try to de-escalate this. And they agreed in exchange with the students, in exchange for removing the encampments and what they were interfering in the university life, they would, I think, agree to some Palestinian scholarships. And on the big issue of divestment, they agreed to hear the students' case for divestment. Not that we'll divest, that we will hear the case. And one article I was reading saying how all these other schools like missed negotiation 101, and how the schools that avoided all of this violence, what they did right was they sort of took the tactic of delay and distract. So we're not going to do what you say, but we're going to listen, consider what you say next fall. And so that was enough to bring the temperature down and get the students to disperse. An interesting strategy, because when the time comes to listen to the students, they're just agreeing to listen to them. They're not agreeing to divest. And I have very little expectation that at the end of the day, any school is actually going to divest from General Dynamics or Lockheed or Boeing or any of these other companies.
You kidding? Those companies will bomb the school to smithereens.
So I think, but was that a smart? But
the one thing you can't do in this country is go after the producers of military equipment, killing equipment. The guns you can't outlaw, even domestically and throughout the world.
Well, I mean,
we provide
it's not going
all the military equipment.
It's not going to change anything. Could they symbolically divest from those stocks? They could, but it's not going to do anything.
Have the students left the
in those?
Northwest?
Yes. So in that regard, it worked. So some people say
Yeshiva University hasn't had any so far. Maybe they do. Maybe they have some protesters
but they got ahead of it and
attacking the Jewish students.
But the thing is, so the conservatives say that's a capitulation, and they never you don't negotiate with people just because they scream the loudest. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, what did they really give up? To say we'll listen to what you have to say is different from we're actually going to do what you say.
Well, maybe,
and I highly doubt at the end of the day they are going to, again, divest from any of those.
No, maybe
and it's 6 months from now.
The conservatives have a point. In other words, by giving into that, it encourages them to do it again and again, because you're giving them a platform that otherwise they didn't have. So they get a chance to articulate. A lot of times the guys come on the programs, just try to get on the program just so they can state their case strongly, no matter how terrible their claims are. The free speech is it's our Constitution is really interesting, because if you remember the amount of money you could give to a candidate was limited in the past. So corporations couldn't give money because they have vast amounts of money. and vast interest in influencing the law, particularly as it relates to their business, like pharmaceutical companies or gun companies. So the Supreme Court held that that those contributions by corporations represent free speech, and that's a stretch. So it shows you what they can do with the Constitution. It's Supreme Court. It depends on their biases, and more over the years, it's become an institution that's partisan.
See, but I think I see why, and I agree. This is a tough one because sometimes you don't want to give people who shouldn't be given a platform.
Right.
However, a lot of times,
to get something accomplished,
just taking the air out a little bit. Again, October's a long way away. A lot can happen in October. By October, half of those kids will be, different places, or, and again, it's just it's a way to, defer, just kick the can down the road, and when things can get crazy. I mean, Kent State, 1970, students, were shot. You have to. How do you avoid? And that was, the result of protests. They weren't even calling for divestment or anything. It was against the war, right?
But more than the war, their own lives, because
the draft,
the young people were subject to draft,
right?
So they were possibly being sent to Vietnam to get killed,
right,
or maimed, or crippled.
Right. And the police, I think you do see lessons learned since then. From reports and things that I've read about Kent State, the police, and with other
overreacted,
and other demonstrations around the country, is that police were pretty zealous on whacking down protesters with the batons, and they would smack them around. NYPD, I think, did a pretty good job.
So who shot the students? The police, or the?
Yeah, it was the National Guard, I think.
Yeah.
But that's what happens when things get out of control. But even putting the shooting aside, there was other protests which were dispersed by police. Police, were rough, and I think lessons have been learned, because in these protests you've seen the last few weeks where NYPD was involved, and LAPD as well. I haven't heard reports, one gun went off, but no students were beat up, no student, so I mean they did a pretty good job restraining, and they're tactically trained pretty well. They got into Hamilton Hall in like 6.5 minutes or something, and took everyone out.
Len, interestingly, there's been much less protest and agitation against the police by the African American community in recent months. I mean, before it was, defund the police, and the police are killing us without stopping the cars. That part of it has slowed down dramatically. You think that's because the police are behaving better, or because they appreciate that their lives are protected by the police and saved by the police?
Or maybe it's just a different cause celeb these days. It's just a different.
Right.
I mean, George Floyd set that off in 2020. Right. If we had another similar kind of thing, you might spark another
more than
outrage.
George Floyd. King in Los Angeles, and the fellow in Florida, a young black Florida has a law that says
Yeah. Stand your ground.
What? Stand your ground. So if you feel you're going to be threatened,
Yeah.
you're allowed to shoot them.
But what really got the BLM movement started was
Yeah.
in 2020 was that. But here it's, I don't know. I think there were more with BLM. There were more people in the country who could who could or had a personal issue with law enforcement. I think in this case, it's like there are a group of students that are passionate about the war in Gaza, but at the end of the day, it's not Vietnam. This is not a U.S. conflict. This is not a U.S. draft. When you think about the validity of a protest in the 60s, you're protesting your own possible draft, your country's involvement in a war. In this case, it's a conflict that the U.S. isn't directly involved in. It doesn't involve people getting abused by the police. So, and the reality is, it is a small number of people, even though they get a lot of airtime and media. It's still a small number.
I believe it should be definitely investigated. The foreign influence of this protest is, first of all these universities are funded with hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars from Qatar and from, as a matter of fact, recently the Houthis and the Iranians said if any student gets expelled,
give you free scholarships.
Right, you could come here. And
just what you want to do, to go to the
Houthi.
Yeah, I'm sure a gay student at Columbia who's protesting the war in Gaza would be very welcomed at a university in Iran. That's what they don't understand. You want to protest, abuse? How about human rights abuse in all those other countries? But I don't know. People have their own cause. I see we're approaching our end of time.
We're getting to the end of time?
Yes.
When you're having fun, time flies. Anyway, again, thank you for joining us. You're my precious, beloved listeners. Tell your friends about the program. Call me if you have any issues with anything we say or do. Other than my wife, I need more agitation and aggravation from others, so you could join in. Anyway, I love you all, and I wish you real, genuine, uplifting, inspiring happiness. You and all your loved ones. Have a great week. See you next week, Wednesday, 6:30. And thank you, Mr. Carter.
Thank you.
You definitely make a major contribution, if not the major contribution, to this podcast. And get this book. You double your money back if you don't like it. Okay? Anyway, God bless you all. And I look forward to being with you again this time next week. Bye.